You fear death when you're happy, and you fantasize about it when you're not. That feeling of hopelessness that you've made your bed and you need to lie in it. That you are not empowered to change your life. There's probably going to be some mild spoilers in this, but nothing too extreme. I originally had something different planned for today. I was going to do a list of Valentine's related books, but I ended up reading one that just really excited me. I read this book and I just really want to talk about it. Right here, we have the book called Girl Flesh. It is by it's by Leitz. It's by Leitz. On the cover, it specifically says it is an extreme horror story about love. I will preface this by admitting that I am relatively new to extreme horror. However, based off of what I have read, I would not have thought that this was extreme horror. I don't know if the term is just a little bit more broad than I realized, or if it's just so subjective that, you know, what the author or the publisher considers extreme, you know, compared to the other ones that I've read. It doesn't really matter that much. Regardless, this is a horror story and it is about love. So whether or not you want to put the word extreme in there is, you know, to each their own. First things first, I read this book in one sitting. It flew for me reading it. The plot of this book: two women wholly enraptured in their professional lives find themselves thrust into the Texas mesa with nowhere to go and no one to trust. Angie is chronically timid, guilt-ridden internet writer lost in a life she didn't choose. Caroline is an ironic, nihilistic musician, pleased to find herself away from her responsibilities. They face unknown dangers and vast darkness, lost in a place without comforts. Will they succumb to the elements or find strength in their bond enough to escape? So you have these two women who find themselves locked in a hotel room, and they don't know how they got there. They know of each other because of their professions, one being a writer, the other one being a musician. But outside of their professional personality, they do not know each other, have never met before. They don't know why they're there. So the whole story is about them trying to escape and get to safety. It's not really a spoiler to me because it says it right on the cover that it's a love story. They do start to develop feelings for each other. There's so many things about this book that I loved. I did like the horror elements that are there. There are a few scenes that do get a little bit nitty-gritty with the description of the violence and whatnot. You see the development of their affection for each other. It does feel a little bit fast, but I think it makes sense given the fact that typically people who go through extreme circumstances together do develop, whether or not it's love, they develop a very strong bond one way or the other with each other. So it's not unrealistic to me that they would bond rather quickly and start to feel very intense feelings for each other rather quickly in the greater scheme of things. Probably my favorite thing about this story was the inner dialogue from our main character. Our main character is the writer, Angie. So much of this book is spent with her inner dialogue. It is spent just this constant existential crisis. Sometimes you just stop and think about how much time you spend doing stuff that you hate, that leaves you too tired to do the stuff that you love, just so that you can keep going and hope things get better. For these characters who are supposed to be kind of micro celebrities, they have their own issues which they can relate to with each other, with the complications of fame, feeling like people want to use you to their benefit, but they don't really care about you. Even your fans, the idea that they're asking for a picture with you, not because they care about you, but they like how they feel being seen with you. They like the way it makes them feel when they can post a picture and people are gonna ooh and ah over it. And you're just sort of a prop to them at that point. The character in the book, when she's having this existential crisis, and I mean, there's really nothing that can bring that about more than a survival story. I think pushing yourself physically, that's why people love going to the gym. I feel like they like pushing themselves physically because it helps them feel like they're pushing themselves mentally as well. Like you have to get through those mental barriers in order to push yourself physically. And so the extreme version of that being in a survival scenario, you get to know yourself in a different way, on a different level, when you are stripped all of your professional image, all of your responsibilities, your money and your possessions, and even the person that you portray yourself to be. Everything is kind of stripped from you when you are just in survival mode, and it's your most base instincts version of yourself. The idea that that is the most real you, when you're not trying to impress anybody and you're just existing as you are. And she kind of refers to that as being a very freeing experience. She refers to feeling like you owe your existence to other people, that you, whether it's a romantic partner or other family members or friendships or professional relationships with boss, whatever, that you owe people something. You owe them a certain version of yourself, that it feels like a cage. And she refers to that as like a bird in a cage, that she is okay with being a bird in a cage, that she'll just sit in her cage and sing. But then when she actually gets to be outside of the cage and she gets a taste of that, it's like she doesn't want to go back. She does not want to go back to her old life. She just wants to revel in this experience of just complete and utter freedom. The lack of responsibilities to, a job or whatever. It's not, it's a fantasy. It's not realistic, obviously, because that's not the world we live in, right? Like, we do need to pay our bills. We need to have jobs that pay our bills. So either you need to do that yourself, or you need to have a sweet arrangement in place to make sure that somebody else is going to take care of that for you. And because you do need a job, you do owe something to people. You do owe your employer. You do owe things to your family sometimes. You do owe things to your partner sometimes. When you're reading the book, you're rooting for this couple. You're rooting for Angie to not be in the cage. You're rooting for her to be free and be at peace with herself and at peace with her life. You're rooting for her to have the life that she wants, the freedom to be loved in your purest, most honest form, as opposed to the partner who loves you because you pay the bills, or the partner who loves you because you tick off this checklist of what they have decided they want in a partner. And the idea that if you didn't do those things, or you stopped doing those things, that everything would fall apart, because that's the only thing that's holding it together, is this fake version of you. If this were real life, this would not be a healthy relationship. This would be a very toxic, codependent, at the very least codependent situation, where when they're apart, they just feel like that they are going to fall apart when they can't be with each other. They need each other in order to feel that zest for like a real person in real life. This wouldn't be healthy. You shouldn't need somebody else in that way. Like, you should be able to be your own person, and that other person just adds to your life, right? Overly codependent relationships are often romanticized. I also think that so many people have like a following, whether it's YouTube or Twitch or whatever. Between that and also just this narrative that you see pushed, relationship advice and all that, people have an expectation that people are going to be obsessed with them. Like, you hear women say, I don't date men unless they're obsessed with me. And people who have an audience who watch everything that they do and support them in everything that they do, I just feel like it creates this really unhealthy expectation of not just a partner, but a friendship. That's just not the way healthy relationships are. There's mutual respect and mutual affection, but there's not needing to cater to the one person. Usually obsession leads to issues with control, or it leads to one person catering to the other person because they're terrified of losing them, and that's not healthy either. It is just a book, but if we're gonna talk about the real life ramifications of this type of love, it's not the sort of thing that you would necessarily want to this degree. That being said though, you do root for them. You do root for them to be together despite that, because it's not real, right? Like, because this isn't my friend who's throwing their entire life away after a hugely traumatic event. It would be perceived very differently if this was real life with real people. Another subject, she brought up death a lot, right? Because you're in a survival situation, so it makes sense. You're gonna think about dying a lot. The characters kind of jump back and forth a lot between being at peace with death and accepting their own demise. They get like a surge of adrenaline and they're gonna fight it tooth and nail. And it kind of comes across like they're fighting because they found each other. They found a reason or a purpose, and they're fighting to be with each other and not leave the other one alone. Reading this book in this survival situation, you feel like these people, because they're young, this isn't normal, natural death in the sense that they've been put in this extreme circumstance. So it makes sense that they would rail against it and really only start to give into it where they feel hopeless. It makes sense that someone who's young, even if they feel unhappy, would want to fight for their life because there's still a chance of change, there's still hope. But it also kind of insinuates that they don't really feel that hope until they meet each other. Sometimes someone comes into your life under extreme circumstances, or you just go through a traumatic experience. There's some kind of catalyst, and you never think about life the same way again after that. I do think that this story is a really beautiful representation of that. It's a story about romance, but it's also kind of a story about loving yourself. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you next time around. Bye. Thrust into the text